Hey everyone, how y'all doing? There's certain things you need to make sure you look out for before you buy anything in the Riviera Maya. It's super important you understand several factors besides doing your homework on who the developer is, where they've built before, how many have they built, have they successfully built and delivered the development to you complete, your condo complete. And what I mean by complete, I'm not just talking about built with bricks and mortar and electricity and stuff like that. I'm talking about complete as in with the condo regime, with the proper documentation. You can go to closing the day you get the condo delivered to you. There are a lot of developers in the Riviera Maya that have a track record of being good developers, but one, they're late on their delivery, and two, when they do deliver to you, you don't have all the proper documentation necessary in order to go to closing. So they'll give you ownership, they'll pass over the condo to you. You have access to your condo. You can put it on Airbnb, but it's not legal. You still can't go to the notary and actually close in your condo and have a deed and title and have full ownership under the government, under the eyes of the government here in the Riviera Maya. And one of those things that you need to have if you want to do bank financing is going to be what's called a condo regime. The condo regime allows you to take ownership and go to closing to do this. So one of the things that you need, for example, that we're going to be talking about right now is a condo regime. And that's part of the documentation. It's kind of a catch-22 for developers. They can't file for the condo regime till they're about 90% finished with the development. And then they file for it, and they're trying to hope that they have it done and built by the time the condo regime comes out. That way they can deliver the condo to you completed, because completed doesn't necessarily mean just built. It means ready to go to closing at the notary. You can't own anything in the restricted zone in Mexico as a foreigner. There's a law that's been in place for a long time. It's not a new law. It's not some magic thing that just appeared, 5-10 years ago. It's been around for a long time for foreign investors. And in order to buy in the restricted zone, which is 50 kilometers from any body of water, in other words, the oceans, basically, right? Or 100 kilometers from a border, which would be Belize, the United States, Guatemala, stuff like that, okay? So in order to buy within this restricted zone, you have to get what's called a Fideicomiso. And a Fideicomiso is basically a deed in trust. That's what it is in English. It's a permit, it's a deed in trust to own your property in the restricted zone. Again, 50 kilometers from the ocean or 100 kilometers from any border, okay? Now, where does a Fideicomiso come from? Well, the Fideicomiso is done by the notary. The notary will file all that paperwork for you. They'll take care of it for you. It's not something you have to do above and beyond. It's part of that 5 to 7% closing costs that the notary is going to charge you to get everything done, get everything filed. That's their closing costs. That's just what it is, okay? But in order to go to closing and to get the Fideicomiso, which gives you permission to own property within the restricted zone, you have to have what's called the condo regime, right? And without that condo regime, you can't go to closing, you can't get your Fideicomiso, and you can't finish the process of buying your property. So in order for you to get a Fideicomiso, you have to have all the documentation in order from the developer in order to be able to go to the closing to get the Fideicomiso done. So the process itself isn't complicated. The only people that complicate this process is usually the developers, or on the resale arena, it's the couple or the families or the businesses that own the condos in the Riviera Maya that didn't complete their processes, or they haven't paid their taxes, or whatever reason maybe. There's a gauntlet of different, like a checklist, so to speak, of things that need to be done on the resales. And I'm telling you this from experience as an agent. I've come over several hiccups over the past couple of years where people bought a long time ago, right? They bought a long time ago, and back then it wasn't as strict, or it wasn't really enforced as much. There's people that have owned condos for 10 years and still don't have deed and title. It's not because Mexico is being shady. It's because the investor is being shady. It's the foreign investor that's taking advantage of the system that we have in Mexico and trying to avoid that closing cost, and they don't have deed and title. I actually lost a sale recently because the previous owners never went to closing. They've owned it for a couple of years and they never finished their closing process, and they didn't have deed and title. So when I found a buyer with another agent, they're ready to go. By the time we got to the notary, they're like, oh, we don't have deed and title. We have to close first, and then we want to pass that cost on to the new buyer. It's just, it's a clusterfuck. And that just causes more problems. So how can you avoid this? What can you do to ensure that the process is smooth for you, not for anybody else, to make sure that your buying process is as pleasant as possible, because we all want to own a piece of paradise. We come down here on vacation and it's amazing. It looks beautiful down here. The beaches are amazing. The people are amazing. The food is terrific. I love being here. I'm raising my family here. I've raised my family here. I'm like on my second go at it right now. And I love it. I would never want to live anywhere else. I love it down here. But we try to find shortcuts. And there's a saying in Spanish, I can't remember the exact saying, it's something that goes in the terms of whatever's cheap now is going to cost you a lot more later, right? So if you try to cut corners and think you're being smarter than everybody else and sneaky, it's just going to cost you more money in the long run. Okay, so what are some of the things you need to look out for? Well, first of all, before you buy a resale, let's talk about resales first. Make sure you're working with a licensed real estate agency. Why? Because when you finally go to a notary or you try to find someone to help you out, what ends up happening is when you have an unlicensed agent that's just been doing this for, let's say, a couple of years, or let's say just a year, and they don't have as many contacts as the tenured real estate agency that have been here for a long time, that come as a package, right? They've got notary contacts. They have government contacts. They have people that can help you get your paperwork. In other words, when you get yourself with an agency and that agency helps you figure out what you need, they're going to help you take care of that, the meticulous stuff that you might not know you need to do, right? So this agency will help you go down the checklist of what needs to be in order before you even send money to this resale to block it off. So that's in the resales. As far as buying a pre-construction development, okay, buying a pre-construction development is a whole new gauntlet of amazing adventure stuff, right? So where do you get the highest reward in investing? Usually comes from the highest risk, right? They kind of go hand in hand. If you want to go with really safe, it's usually a minimal or, a little blip extra on making money. But if you jump all in, on a very high risk opportunity, you're doing it because of the high possibility of a high return, but there's no guarantees. Well, it's not as fickle as what I'm explaining to you right now. Pre-construction, I have had great experiences with pre-construction, but I have had a few nightmares as well, where everything seems hunky-dory, but then we come to the end of we're down to the touchdown, we're getting down there, and for some unknown reason, the developers, agents misled us into believing so one thing was one way, another thing is another way, and it really wasn't the way it was supposed to be in the first place. So let my mistakes help you and guide you on what to look for and how to check on this developer. Let's start with the financing that developers can use. There's several different ways a developer pays for the development that will have an effect on the price. It will have an effect on when the completion dates will be, whether they'll be on time or not, and the quality of the development, the quality of the construction, because different financing implies different type financing for them, for the developer to build. Different financing for the developer to build implies different tactics on how fast they need to build. Do they have time to build? Is it slow and steady wins the race? Is it sales tactics? Is it bribery? Try to get people to buy more because they're giving away stuff. There's lots of different ways that they're going to do this. And I'd like to go over just a few of those different ways of financing that developers have, okay? So, for example, they have what's called a crédito puente, or a bridge credit, right? But it's really doesn't mean literally bridge credit in English, but the developers can secure funds that they need to start or continue construction without having to wait for pre-sales or other financing sources. So in essence, this allows for continuous work on the project, which can lead to a quicker completion and delivery of units to buyers. These are the pros, right? This is the positive. The project continuity, for example, in a bridge loan, it ensures that the project doesn't stall due to cash flow issues, which can be crucial for maintaining the timeline and budget. It provides a developer with the financial flexibility to manage unexpected expenses or delays. So in essence, what this is telling it is a lot of developers will do a pre-construction friends and family sales. And until they sell 30% of their construction or 30% of their project, that's when they start to build. And they use that money to build. So what can happen with that? Well, what can happen is the obvious, right? What if they don't sell? What if they sell 30% and we get into a situation like we have in Tulum right now, where we have developers with 75 studios, 120 studios, 13 one bedrooms and two one bedrooms, and two bedrooms, and they can't sell because they're stuck with all these studios, and they really can't build because they didn't have the type of financing they needed to complete the project. So instead of basing the entire development on the sales process, this is allowing you, they're securing loan from the bank, and it's going to give them money continuously throughout the development. They're not going to give it to them all at the same time, right? What they're going to do is once they have 30% built, they're going to give them 30%. They're going to give them money as the construction goes on, which is fantastic. But there's also negative sides of this, right? So now, last but not least, another benefit, that having this type of a bridge loan or crédito puente that developers get is the developers are going to have the potential for giving higher returns. Developers can offer better pre-construction pricing to early buyers because they have the capital to fund the project without needing immediate cash flow from sales. In other words, there's a lot of pre-construction opportunities out there in the Riviera Maya, lots of them. And I would say a majority of them use the pre-sales in order to fund the construction. In this particular case, and in this type of situation, since the developer has already secured the loan, secured the money, then they're going to be able to offer way more competitive pre-construction pricing. Not necessarily, well, let me change the term. I'm not saying competitive as in competing with other people. Just a more lucrative pre-construction pricing, friends and family, that'll be well below market because it's not a sales tactic to try to cover the construction. It's more just start getting the things going, right? So the early adopters or the early purchasers or the true friends and family VIP lists are going to give a 10 to 15% less than the heavy discounts people get already on the pre-construction, which it's a big deal, right? It's a huge entry point. That's a good investment. That gives you a really good opportunity as an investor to try to get the highest return on every dollar you put into the pre-construction, okay? Now, it's not all rainbows and unicorns and butterflies. There is a negative side to every positive, right? And why they're bad, why they can be bad for a developer is they have extremely high interest rates. You see, bridge loans, they often come with a higher interest rate compared to traditional long-term loans because they're short-term and they involve a much higher risk for the lender. So this can increase the overall cost of the project, and obviously it's going to be passed down to the buyers, right, in most cases. So you might get a heavier discount because it's in pre-construction, because it's secured through a bridge loan, but the starting point might be a little bit higher because they got to pay those interest rates, right? So another negative would be pressure to sell quickly, right? Developers need to sell units quickly to repay the bridge loan, which can lead to like super aggressive sales tactics and reduced negotiation and flexibility. Now, if the market slows down or if the units don't sell as quickly, then the developer they're in a financial strain. Another negative would be pressure to sell quickly because the developers are going to have to sell them fast or faster because they have to pay back the loan, right? And the loan, it's expensive and it has high interest rates. So the sales tactics that are going to be used, the pressure tactics, so to speak, that they need to sell to pay back the loan could be different, a little more aggressive, right? They might not feel as comfortable. Not used car salesmen, Uncle Bob's used car tire sales in Philly or something. But the tactics just seem a lot more aggressive, okay? Now, if the market slows down or if the units don't sell quickly as expected, then the developer faces a huge financial strain and potentially can affect the project completion or quality. So, there's only two things that are guaranteed in life, right? That's death and taxes. That's it. And taxes, there's workarounds. If you ask Trump, and there's workarounds here in Mexico, but death, we're all going to die, right? That's guaranteed. So to tell you there's different levels of assurity, different levels of completion percentages, right? Based on which loans they're getting, gives you more certainty on which is a calculated risk and which is just a full-blown risk, right? And there's lots of things you need to do on your homework when you're looking at these developers, right? I mentioned some of those earlier in the video, and I'm going to go through this. I'm going to go through a bunch of individual stuff over the next series of videos on what to look for, how to understand it, understand what a notary's process really is, what they really do for you, how they're here to help you, how to look for a licensed real estate agency that's going to help you along the process. So it's not here just to make a quick buck, but here to establish long-term relationships. So this is just a little cliff notes, but I really wanted to get into, financial security of the developers and how are these guys building and what they're doing to get their money. Okay. So in conclusion, a crédito puente or a bridge loan, it can be a useful tool for developers. It will ensure that the project moves forward without interruptions. However, it does come with significant risks, including high interest rate costs, high costs in general, pressure to sell the units really fast. I mean, buyers should be aware of the developer's financial strategy, like I mentioned earlier, okay? And the risk involved with each project funded by a bridge credit or a crédito puente. It can impact the stability and the quality of the development. So I'm going to go over the next type. That's just one option. Okay, so the next one, the famous one, pre-sales, pre-construction sales. All right, so now we go to the one that's super popular here in the Riviera Maya. Okay, the first one that I went over, that was a little more complicated to be able to get. Usually, developers who have got all their ducks in a row, have crossed all their T's, dotted all their I's, and have really good stability and financial stability that they can prove to the banks, those are the ones that get these bridge loans, okay? Because they're very complicated to get and they're very difficult to get. So the guys that get those are typically very solid long-term developers in the region. Now, the next one that's the most popular one everyone has is pre-construction sales. Pre-construction sales, exactly what I'm telling you they are. Usually, pre-construction sales is exactly what it sounds like. It is 100% pre-construction. Before the first brick has even been laid down, people are already pumping it and selling this product, okay? Now, the developers will sell the units before the project is completed or even before the construction begins. This is to raise capital. Buyers typically pay a portion of the total cost up front with the balance due upon completion. So you have different forms of payment agreements, right? You're going to have like a 30-70, 30-60-10, right? You're going to have a 30-70, you'll have a 30-60-10, you could have a 50-50, or you can have an 80-20. Now, what I'm saying, I'm talking about down payments, right? If you give 80% upfront in a pre-construction, they're probably going to give you 10 to 12, sometimes 15% discount because you're giving them so much working capital upfront. You're taking that risk with them, right? So they're going to give you a big fat discount compared to everybody else. And then what they'll do is you'll pay that 80% now, and then at the completion of construction, you'll pay the other 20% at the notary when it's developed and it's done and constructed. They'll give you the keys, right? Now, the most common or the popular one is 30-70. 30% down now, 70% at delivery. That is usually a typical strong point for any developer to accept. In other words, if a developer can accept 30% now, 70% at delivery, they've got good credibility in my books because they don't need your capital on a monthly basis, right? So when I mentioned earlier, there's like 30-60-10, right? That, for example, will be 30% down now, and it would be 60% divide over how many months they're going to be constructing. So you'd have to make a monthly payment every single month. That means that they need your monthly payment to continue construction, right? Versus the bigger guys that didn't get the Crédito Puente, right? So I guess in an order of like, I don't want to say best to worst, right? But Crédito Puente, the bridge loan, amazing. Guys that can do 30-70, developers that can take 30% down and they don't need any more of your cash until they're done. That's good in my books. And then you got the ones that are like 30-60-10, 30% down, 60% over a period of 18 to 24 months at 0% interest, and then the final payment at closing. And then last but not least, there are developers that need 40%, 45% even to get started. Then these guys need capital up front. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying they're bad developers, that they're going to do a bad job. They just need more cash up front to do their project. What are the pros? What are the pros for pre-construction? Well, the pros is immediate cash flow, right? It provides immediate cash flow to fund the construction. It lowers financing costs. It reduces the need for high interest rate loans. It gives market validation. Pre-sales help the developer really see if this is going to be a good development. Imagine if you were able to test every theory that you've got. Imagine if you were able to try it out before you actually went all in, right? You kind of can do that with a developer. as being a developer. As a developer in pre-construction, friends and family, or -2 price lists, you can test the market. You can see how many blocks or how many reservations you get in the first 30 to 60 days to see if it's going to be a viable solution, if the market is hitting or if not hitting. And if it doesn't, the 3 or 4 people that did put a block on there, it's 100% refundable. It's not going to be, you're not shysting anybody. I mean, it's not a bad proof of concept. Where it gets kind of hairy is when you are 50%, 60% sold. And now you've got a bunch of inventory, the market has crashed, and you can't finish building. Most projects, most developers. So imagine being able to test the waters, right? And then at the end, if it doesn't work out, you give the money back. I mean, I know it sounds, crazy. I haven't heard of very many cases that's happened. Most of these developers, if not all, have done market analysis, have done proper research, have done their homework, so to speak, to see what the market is looking for. One thing that I can tell you that side note, what happened in Tulum, what's actually happening right now in Tulum. So those are the pros. Those are the positive things of pre-construction sales. It allows the developers to have a little more freedom without lots of high costs, lots of interest rate costs, and gives you an opportunity to have a great entry point on pre-construction sales. Now let's talk about the cons. So obviously, as usual, you're going to have pressure to deliver, right? Developers have to meet deadlines, or they're going to have to avoid legal issues or penalties. And they have a little bit more of a limited flexibility. See, design changes or project adjustments can be difficult once pre-sales agreements are in place. And then, of course, the buyers are at higher risk, right? They risk that the product delays or developer defaults. One of the things that I learned down here in the Riviera Maya, I've seen a lot, is most of the contracts, if not all the contracts of the developers, they give themselves 120 to 180 day leniency or window. I think they call it act of God or nature kind of thing, where if something happens, it gives them that extra time to build, right? Almost all the contracts have a 6-month window in there, okay, that allows them to go past the due date. So if their delivery date is supposed to be in December, they've got a 180-day window. It can be before or after December 15th is when their delivery date is going to be, which is okay. I understand that there's ups and downs, and there's situations where. So let's talk about the cons, right? So they're going to have pressure to deliver. The developers must meet deadlines to avoid legal issues or penalties. They have limited flexibility on project adjustments. It can be difficult for to make any changes at all or adjustments once the pre-sale agreements are in place. And the buyers have a bigger risk of project delays or developer default. And one of the things that developers do for themselves, they insure with themselves, they give themselves usually a 180-day window, a leniency window for delivery days. So if they tell you 15th of December is when we're going to deliver, they give themselves 180 days to have like a buffer, so to speak, right? Just in case. I think they call it an act of God insurance clause or whatever that's in there. And then, of course, after that, they've got, opportunities for, if they don't deliver on time, they're going to give you equivalent of what the percentage of the value of the property is. I mean, it works out for both people, but also, it's obviously going to be in favor of the developer, right? Just like any contract in this planet. So in conclusion, pre-construction sales is a good opportunity. You just have to see what type of payment options the developer's offering, and that'll kind of give you an idea, an inside look at how much money they really have and how long they've been doing their developments based on the payment options that they're going to offer you. So another form that developers sometimes use is called equity financing. Equity financing is pretty much what it sounds, right? They sell equity into the project to raise capital. Equity investing, right? Equity investing or equity sales is pretty much what it sounds like, right? So a developer is going to sell equity in their project to raise capital. Now, these investors might be individuals, they could be venture capitalists, or they're institutional investors who raise a share of the profit. The developer is going to sell equity in the project in order to raise capital. And then the investor could be individuals, venture capitalists, or institutional investors who receive a share of the profits. So the pros of this is, unlike loans, equity financing doesn't require payment if the project fails, right? So the risk is shared with the investors, reducing the developer's financial burden. And then the investors often bring valuable expertise and connections. So this is a great pro if you can find investors, right? They're going to share the weight or the burden with you. They're like, you know what? This project looks amazing. Let's go all in together. And it's a calculated risk. An investor understands all calculated risks. They understand what they're doing, why they're doing it. And then you've got versus the bank, they want their money back no matter what. Whether you fail or not, they want their money back, right? I'm not saying that investors are just going to throw money to you. Now, the positive or the pro of having, equity sales or equity investments is you have the opportunity to be able to have less pressure as a developer. The developer has less pressure on them. They're not going to be worried about having to pay back that loan because now the success of that project is taken upon everybody, everyone together. They're going to make money together, right? That's the reason why the investors jumped in on this. So it's a lot less pressure for the developer, and it's not a bad gig, right? It's not a bad gig. You're going to have less pressure sales. You're going to have less, you might have less flexibility on the money, right? On the sales tactics, right? A sales tactic would, give you heavy discounts on your down payments. If these guys have solid investors and they are offering a great product at a competitive price, they're not going to budge on price. They don't need to, right? So the project's going to sell yes or yes based on who the developer is, who the architect is. Is it a branded residence, non-branded residence, location? Do they have ocean view? Is it a jungle villa? I mean, lots of factors that go into this. There's so many factors that we'd have to go into that I'll do a series of videos for y'all to see market research, location, using different tools that are available at your disposal, different tools that are at your disposal that you can use to get the best location based on what you're wanting to buy it for, right? That's a whole nother video. Right now, we're talking about, let's figure out which developer is a good developer and what kind of questions should I be asking in order to get the most secure and best solid investment, whether it be for retirement or an investment purposes for return on your investment, right? So what are the cons? What are the cons of using equity sales? Well, the developers have to share points with the investors, right? Reducing their overall. So some of the cons is profit sharing, right? In the end, the developer has to share the profits. So they have less money in the end, right? It's reducing their overall return. And then they can sometimes lose control, right? Investors can demand significant influence over the project decisions. So the moment you get investors in there with the project, these developers no longer have 100% control, right? Now it's a committee. Now you got a board of directors, right? So to speak. And you've got, depending on how much money you put on that project is how much you get to say. And then of course there are some developers that are like, look, I know what I'm doing. I have great products. I've developed before. I've got X amount of developments already done in this region and they've all been sold out. If you want to join me on this adventure, give me some of your money, but I'm still in control. Then there's a developer saying, look, I've got an idea. I think it'll be amazing based on the analysis and the market research. It looks like it's going to be a great project. You guys want to jump on with me? And they'll jump on under conditions of certain control they're going to have over whether it be the books or the designs or whatever whatever it may be. Right? So, but this is something that you need to know. You as a consumer, you need to know which form of credit is being used to build this development. And then of course, the last but not least on the cons, equity deals can be complex to structure and manage. It's not just simple cut and dry. Okay, you get 35%. It could be, I'm not a CPA and I'm not a financial analyst. I have common sense, right? So some of and I've seen different deals go through with developers and investors, and some of the investors say, you know what? Terrific. I'll give you the money. But the first 25 condos or the first 25 homes that sell, you're paying me back first. I'm getting my money back, and then I'm getting 25% of my money in the next 2 years, right? So, I mean, in that case, what's happening is a developer is building and selling and giving money back to the investor, and in some cases where they're going to go 50-50 on it. And there's maybe not infinite, but there's lots of different opportunities for developers and investors. As a matter of fact, if you're an investor, let me know. I got developers that are looking for money. So that's the cons. Equity sales is a positive for you. It could be less hassle for you. It might not be as risky for you. Okay. The project completion has a higher percentage than other options of financing. And let's talk about the next option. So the next one is the infamous bank loan. You're probably asking yourself, what's the difference between a bank loan and a bridge loan? Well, a bank loan, they give you all the money up front. I say, I need X amount of money to build, and this is how much my project's going to cost me. Here's my buffer. Here's my credit score. Here's my business, my business credibility, my business credit, how long we've been in business, what we've done, and they give you a loan. Versus the bridge loan is you get approved for all that money, but they give it to you in percentages based on the development's progress, right? So it kind of goes in waves. They kind of give you cash flow as you go, versus a bank loan is here's all the money up front. Okay, so what are the pros? What are the pros of the bank loans? The pros is, well, it's a reliable source of capital, right? Banks are going to provide large sums of money to fully do the construction, which is amazing. And you can actually do structured repayments. You know, they're predictable. The repayment schedules help with the financial planning. It's not something that's going to be, it's not going to go up and down. It's not a fluctuating. It's a fixed interest rate usually. It's not it's fixed. The payments are structured. They're predictable. The repayment schedules help with financial planning. You understand what you need to sell to cover your loan, stuff like that. And it's got lower cost, right, for structured loans. Structured loans typically have lower interest rates. So, and what are the cons of a bank loan? Well, again, high interest rates for unsecured loans. They can be expensive. Collateral risk. They usually require valuable collateral.